Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. And I've been kicking myself all week because I used to own all but one of the physical volumes of this manga From Far Away by Kyoko Hikawa. And a couple of years ago, I gave them away when I was getting ready to move. I think I donated them to Salvation Army. And my old library used to have volume one and doesn't have volume one in every war. So all week I've been like going nuts wanting to talk about how awesome From Far Away is, but not able to get my hands on volume one. So don't be like me. This is a highest recommendation. Collect the physical volumes if you can, and then don't give them away, because this is a series that's worth revisiting again and again. So I've mentioned it in a couple videos and even in one of my live streams with Lyle Convoy that I've been rereading this, and it's get so many good things to talk about. So one of the old gags from this channel was Summa Triggerum, Summa Spoilerum, Summa Tangentum. All the triggers, all the spoilers, all the tangents, especially in the early days where I was kind of camera shy and didn't know exactly what to talk about or what to focus on. So for this one, since I have a lot of tangents, like a lot of interesting things to talk about, here's what I thought I'd do. I want to give you guys a spoiler-free review of the entire series where I can get all my tangents out about why this is a great series, and then I want to go through each volume, at least the first two volumes, and maybe more if I think there's more that can be gleaned from the other volumes to make my point. But I want to do like a really, like, show you every little detail, in-depth analysis showing you all the little things for why this story works. But this video is not going to have any spoilers, not going to talk about the plot too much. I want to talk about generally why I think From Far Away is almost like a forgotten classic or a forgotten gem in manga, and why this has a lot of applications to things people are talking about in SJW comics, in social justice, in fantasy storytelling. Clickbait. I think we can solve the gender wars with this this weeby stuff. All right, so let me acknowledge something, which is that I have a lot of personal affection for this manga, which colors my impression of it. I believe this was the first manga I read where I knew it was manga. Like maybe I read some Pokemon manga but didn't know that's what it was. This is the first time I looked at a book and said, oh, it's a backwards book. It's a manga. That means it comes from Japan. How interesting. And like you bring it home from the library and, your family would say, oh, it's a backwards book. That's so unusual. So for me, it has a lot of personal nostalgia because this introduced me to a lot of the techniques of manga and the distinctiveness of manga. So when I came back to reread it, I thought, well, this will be kind of like a nice nostalgic trip for me. I'll return to this. And I was so warmly surprised. It was like the experience of rereading The Hobbit and finding so many good things that an adult can appreciate that a child might miss. The reason you should try to collect this is one of those series that you can revisit over and over again and keep catching great stuff. So let's look at the outline of my spoiler-free review and why I wanted to talk about this. Okay, so first, feminist tropes, damsels in distress, and Mary Sue's. Now, I think kind of unfortunately, as people have tried to talk about, Star Wars or Mary Sue's in comic books or the representation of female characters, these kinds of things should be nerdy comic book discussions. Like we should be yelling at each other sort of good-naturedly over whether this character sucks or this character rocks and kind of having a laugh about it because we're getting nerdy and enthusiastic about stories we like. But recently it's the culture war or the battle of the sexes has crept its way into nerd culture. So if you dislike Rey in Star Wars, if you dislike the all-female Ghostbusters, the argument is that you have a problem with women, or if you're not just a misogynist, you might at least be a latent misogynist who is, I don't know, like you have these sort of cryptic bad feelings about women, and that's why you have bad feelings about the movie. And the Mary Sue website, the feminist blog, is called the Mary Sue because of this sort of political back and forth. I remember when Mary Sue first became kind of like a hot button issue for feminists to talk about, they'd say things like, Batman is a Mary Sue. So the reason I want us to look at these issues is these are things that we can think about that this weeby manga can help us think about. So what does it help us think about with regards to damsels in distress and Mary Sue's? Well, the main character, Noriko. When I was a little kid, I used to say Noriko, so I apologize, weebs, if I slip back into my, I don't know, like English way of saying their name. But Noriko is a character whose superficial traits would make you think she is just a Mary Sue or just a damsel in distress, but she is so much more than that. You could write an essay where you take little panels out of context and say, oh, look, she's a damsel in distress. This is so sexist. Or even like when I say her personality is Mary Sue-ish, well, let's think. She's blonde. She's cute. If you read it, then you see she's kind of clumsy and very innocent and sweet and enthusiastic, right? So she has all of these superficial traits, which would make you say, oh, that sounds like a Mary Sue. But the execution of the story means that is not only that she's not a Mary Sue. Noriko is a fascinating character, an excellent character, and really, this whole series rides on the strength of her character. Like the male protagonist who shares some of the spotlight, he's okay, but I really think she's the heart and soul of this story, and it's an example I think most writers and artists should have in the back of their minds for a really good female protagonist. So the interesting thing about her is that she looks like she might be an Mary Sue, but as you read it, she is clearly not. And I think it's really important to look at examples like that to bring into your own mind. So, primal storytelling, the hero's journey, chaos versus order, eh? You go and you fight the dragon, and the dragon is chaos, eh? And then you clean your room. All right, so all that kind of stuff I think is really important for fantasy storytelling, becoming something. And that's such a basic thing, like heroes with 1,000 faces. You've probably heard numerous discussions of some of like primal ideas in the context of fantasy storytelling, and From Far Away has that. And so this is a side tangent. See, all my tangents. So, there is a whole subgenre of Japanese manga and novels called alternate world or reincarnation manga, which I realized later is what this is, but I didn't think of it as cliche back in, this came out in the 90s. So this came out before that became like a really cliche thing. It's a shoujo manga, meaning for girls, and I didn't know that when I first read it. So I remember reading this and thinking, wow, this is such a dope action story. This is so cool. Such great action scenes. And then when I read what shoujo meant, I thought, what? This is for girls? Huh? What? I don't understand what this means. So the point I'm trying to make is that even though this story has so many little motifs of kind of cliche girl stories to it, when I go through volume 1 and 2, I kind of want to make the point that Kyoko Hikawa is hitting really important character beats, and because she hits those character beats for Noriko, it holds the whole story together and gives it its weight and impact. So I think all the great stories have this sort of real primal dimension to them, but you may be more or less aware if you're even doing that. Like you may have like read a bunch of stories and have kind of like an idea of what the hero's journey is, or you might just kind of write that naturally and it just sort of comes out of your soul. So I'm going to be arguing that this is a good primal storytelling example when I dig into the details. Okay, the next thing is what I call having your butt kicked versus being kick butt, which is just my goofy way of just describing characters going through difficulty. Because it's just kind of fun to do. Like you'll watch a movie and you'll say, "Whoa, that kicks butt," and then you'll say, "Whoa, she got her butt kicked." It's kind of just a silly way of thinking about whether the character is succeeding or struggling and failing as they go through their story. Now, I think to not be a Mary Sue, there always has to be this balance of some butt kicking versus having your butt kicked. And what percentage of that is, you could mix it up, sure, right? But there ought to be at least a little sum of both. What is butt kicking? Well, it could be like literally running around kicking monsters' butts, like Goku. And Goku is a character who spends most of his time kicking butts. But once in a while, he'll get his butt kicked. I remember, I think it was Commander Blue in the original Dragon Ball story. He was one of the first people to really give Goku a run for his money physically, right? But generally, Goku is a character who more often than not kicks butt. the way I talked about butt kicking, kind of as a joke, butt kicking can be more than just literally beating up a bad guy. It could be something moral. So Hamlet, when Hamlet discovers the ghost of his father, reveals that he was murdered by Hamlet's uncle, and Hamlet must swear revenge on his uncle for his father's death. Whoa, that kicks butt. He's gonna get revenge. But then when Hamlet, doubts himself and wonders whether the vision of his father's ghost is real and contemplates suicide. Whoa, that's Hamlet getting his butt kicked. So, do you get the point? Like, beyond just beating someone up, a character having a moral quandary could be an example of them kicking butt or getting kicked around by life. Emotion. So I've written Chihiro here from Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. I think that's the movie by Miyazaki that won a Oscar for Best Animated Film. So in Chihiro's story, not only do bad things happen to her and she struggles, but even her emotional reactions to things could be examples of her kicking butt or having her butt kicked. Like, she'll see a ghost for the first time and she'll freak out, and it'll be all over her face and all over her body language. She just does not know what's going on or how to, she literally can't even handle all of this mystical stuff that's going on, right? So the reason I'm thinking of Chihiro is I feel like this should be like a character archetype or something. Like, I'll say the Chihiro character archetype, and you'd all like instantly understand what I mean. But I haven't seen this character type nailed down enough yet, where there's like one term where we all describe what it is. But what I would describe the Chihiro archetype is a character, generally a female character, it seems to me, who spends most of her time getting her butt kicked, but then gradually starts kicking a little butt. So do you see how that's different from Goku? Goku generally wins. He wins. I think he wins almost all of his fights, and he's very self-confident, and he's very able to handle most situations he gets himself in. But Chihiro spends most of the movie Spirited Away freaking out. So this might be fun. If you get like a bowl of you can't do this with alcohol because you'll die. But if you get like a bowl of M&Ms and a bowl of Skittles, eat a Skittle every time Chihiro has her butt kicked, and you're going to mostly be eating Skittles. And then every time Chihiro does something which kicks butt, eat an M&M. When she's winning, when she's doing something awesome, eat an M&M. And then what you'll find is eventually you start eating a few M&Ms. Eventually Chihiro starts kicking a little butt. But even then, she still gets her butt kicked a lot. And it could be even really little things, like when she's trying to help one of the spirits in the bathhouse, and then she has to like tie a rope around something, and then she slips up and the rope comes out of her hands. So even when Chihiro starts succeeding and doing awesome stuff, she's still a little kid, and she's still kind of incompetent, and she's still learning and making mistakes for that whole movie. It's going to be those kinds of details, I think, that are really important for artists and writers to look at. So oh, there we go. I wrote it there. The Chihiro archetype, butt gets kicked, finally kicks some butt. So I didn't watch Spirited Away until recently, and the kind of what clips for me is that in this series, Noriko fits that archetype. She is a character who spends most of her time in this fantasy story having a hard time. She's a normal high school girl. She doesn't have any like magical super duper, unicorn powers, sparkle magic, right? She doesn't have any of that, and it would kind of spoil the character if she did have that, because the point of the character is she's a completely average Japanese high school girl who is thrust into a horrendously dangerous situation which she is not prepared for. But gradually over the course of time, starting in chapter 1, they start showing you this in chapter 1, so she doesn't spend like the first few volumes just as an idiot. You start seeing her take steps to have more wherewithal, to do what she can practically to make the best of her horrible situation. And, I wish I could send Dr. Jordan Peterson this pile of manga and hear him like do like his chaos thing about it, because that's what she does. She has such a good mindset that the little things she does become heroic, even as she remains this very weak, very average, very normal young girl. And as the viewpoint character, you then click with that, because I don't care if you're a big muscle-bound ape. It would be horrifying to be transported into another world. Like the reason I think alternate world reincarnation manga kind of became a joke is that they all became kind of like, oh boy, I'm in magical super duper land. This is so cool. From far away, even though it's a pretty general light fantasy, does some neat twisteroos on like some fantasy tropes. Like, what if you were the chosen one, but being the chosen one sucked and you didn't get any magical super duper powers? What if you were Harry Potter and Voldemort was after you, but you just didn't have any magic whatsoever? That kind of a thing. What and just the fact that this is a fantasy story where she doesn't do like magical little stuff. You know, it's okay to have stories where you have magical superpowers and you kick a bunch of butts, but the point of the character is that she is a normal person who has to show sort of moral courage in the face of her bad situation. In that sense, she's kind of like Batman. I'm not saying that Noriko is Batman. I'm just saying she's literally Batman. She has a similar appeal to a character like Batman because Batman's a normal superhero who can somehow has so much drive and determination and intelligence that he can contribute to a team of these gods-like superheroes in his world. Noriko is always an average girl, and Izark actually gets most of like the magical super duper beat 'em up kind of stuff. But Noriko translates as a heroic, admirable, deeply impactful character based on her actions and what she does. And some of her actions are very small, little things, like little acts of kindness, little decisions she makes. And these get her to the point where she's then able to make better decisions. So when I talk about Volume 1, I think I'll fill it. I'll probably have to talk about the digital. The digital edition sucks. I'm sorry. I got it on Google Play, where Google puts books up, and if Google wants to be the evil overlords of the world and control all our thoughts and dreams, the least Google needs to do is learn how to scan a comic book at over 300 DPI. You can't even read some of the words on the version on Google Play. So I can't recommend that. It's on Kindle, so if you don't want to break the bank, you might be able to get it on Kindle, and I hope that version is more readable than the Google Play book. But even though I haven't been able to get the physical edition of book 1, I have purchased legally the itty bitty Google version of book 1. So that might be enough for me to do my analysis of book 1, because what I want us to look at is the big moments and the little details. The big moments where Noriko makes important decisions, define her character, and this was, for me as an adult, helped everything click and say, wow, this is so much better than I remembered it. I was nostalgic for it. I wasn't nostalgic for enough. And then because it hits those it hits those beats, it remembers to retain the core of the character, then everything else starts to work better. Like the little cute comedy moments where she's kind of klutzy, well, those work better because we've seen the important moments where we understood the heart of the character. The beautiful, fantasy scenes where they have lots of, little gorgeous ornate details, well, that's all cooler because now it's beautiful ornate detail on top of a solid story. Comics as a medium, it's sort of like the main story is the meat and potatoes. That's what gives it the nutrients. But all of the extra little artistic details are the seasoning and the spices and the sauce for the stew. If you have one but you don't have the other, well, you're gonna have a problem. If you just have meat and potatoes, well, good story, but not that interesting to eat. If you have all the spices but you don't have any meat and potatoes, well, it tastes good, but it's not going to give you any nutrients that really stick with you. So when we look at From Far Away Volume 1, we're gonna focus on big awesome moments and the little details and how they work together to make a fabulous character who isn't a strong female protagonist, but is a excellent female character. So with that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. Did you ever hear about this before? I think it was a popular pick for libraries because it kind of has this sort of, well, it's a shoujo manga, like it's got pretty girl main character and it's got like pretty girl ornate stuff inside it. But I think that the sword fighting scenes made it appeal enough to boys that a lot of libraries figured, yeah, let's pick this one up.
I wish this had an anime adaptation, but it never got one. Maybe in a more just world, this would have gotten a nice anime adaptation.
But 'twas not to be. This is a story you can, for now, you can only experience in
The form of manga. Sadly, I think that Volume 13, they've all been out of print for a few years, but Volume 13 has been out of print for decades, it seems like. And none of the libraries I've ever been to have had Volume 13. I was never able to afford Volume 13. So this would be an expensive one for you to collect the physical editions of, but I do think it would be worth it. And I hope when we dig into Volume 1 and 2, I'll show you the details of why this is such a successful fantasy story. So I think I've said enough. With that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. I love my waifu. Ah!